I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnn. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
Hi, and welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I'm the founder of the Food Truck Training Group on Facebook, co-owner with my beautiful wife, Melissa, of our own food truck. It's called Food Truck 101. And I'm the executive director of the National Street Food Vendors Association, which is a nonprofit dedicated to education, advocacy, and uplifting all food vendors. Today, we're going to be talking about what to do when your propane freezes. Typically, a food truck owner or any kind of outdoor vendor will say their propane freezes. What do I do? Well, the first thing we got to understand is your propane didn't freeze. What has happened is you've turned on your equipment. It may work for a few minutes, and then it starts to spit and sputter and the flames go out, and you're not getting full use of the propane. So food truck owners call that the propane's frozen. Well, let's learn a little bit of science first, then we'll talk about how to fix the problem. Now, you got to understand the science behind propane. Propane's boiling point is negative 44 degrees. You're most likely not vending when it's negative 44 degrees. Now, you're going, but Bill, what's a boiling point got to do with it? So think about a pot of water that's sitting on your stove right now. You got water in it. You turn on the fire, and at some point, you'll start to see steam rising off that water, and eventually it starts to boil. And then there's a whole bunch of steam coming off of it at that point when it's boiling. You use propane. Now, we think of propane as being a gas, but in order for you to be able to use that gas, it goes into those tanks in liquid form. It's under pressure. The pressure is what keeps it at the liquid form. The boiling of the liquid propane creates the gas that you burn. That boiling process starts when the temperatures are warmer than negative 44. The issue becomes, just like when you're boiling water, the water starts to steam as it gets closer to that boiling point. And then eventually it becomes that rapid boil where there's a whole bunch of steam coming off of it. That's what the bubbles are. They're the water turning from liquid to gas and then rising to the top and exploding, creating the steam. So propane does the exact same thing. So when it's boiling, it's turning into gas. The gas fills up the tank, and it looks for a way to get out of the tank. It's where it goes into the propane lines and through your regulator and then eventually to your equipment. So you see, your propane doesn't freeze. Technically, the freezing point where it turns from a liquid to a solid, we all know that point for water is 32 degrees. You have 31 degree weather and your pipes are above ground, they're probably going to freeze. Propane, to freeze, going from that liquid state to a solid state, is negative 306 degrees. So you definitely are not vending at negative 306. You're probably not living at negative 306. So your propane did not freeze. The propane, again, is not vigorously boiling, so it's not creating enough gas to be able to go into the lines to be able to get to your equipment. So how do you get beyond the science now that you understand that it's not technically frozen, but you still have the issue? Your equipment is not functioning the way you want it to. First thing you want to do is make sure you start with a full tank. So you're going to be refilling your propane way more frequently in the colder months than you would in the summer months. The reason you're doing that is you're reducing the space that it takes for the bubbling, the boiling of the propane to turn into gas, because it's got to fill that space up before it decides to find an exit to go out those lines that you have for your propane. So if you have a 100-pound tank that only has a couple of pounds left of propane in it, it's not going to build up pressure because the propane at the bottom is still bubbling, it's still boiling, Even with the cold weather, it's still boiling because you're not out at negative 44. So it's still bubbling away, but there's so much room for the gas. It's going to take it a long time to build up. And when it does build up, it's getting relief by going through those lines so it never builds up to sufficient pressure to keep your equipment burning propane the way you want it to. So start with a full tank every single day. Insulate your tank. You don't want to completely cover your tank, but you want to have some type of insulated wrap that's designed for propane tanks to help maintain the pressure. What it does is it keeps the temperature inside the propane tank warmer, so it's now bubbling more, again creating the gas to fill up the space that's in the tank to go through the lines. You get those from a hardware store, probably can get it online at Amazon, but again, you want something that's designed for propane tanks. Don't be the person that says, hey, just get an electric blanket like we use on our bed. Has to be reset every 4 hours, but it'll work. Not designed for propane, not safe, and you just gave the insurance company a reason not to pay your claim if you have a propane-related problem because you've done something that is not recommended by the propane manufacturers. Keep your tank off the ground. A lot of people use the 20-pound tanks and they keep it low to the ground. Well, cold sinks. So it's colder right at ground level than it is even at the height that your face would be. So keep the propane tank off the ground. Certainly, if you have the opportunity, put it in sunlight or position your trailer or truck to where the sun is hitting the propane tanks. That helps a bunch. Even if you just have to place your tank on a dunnage rack, you can get aluminum dunnage racks for next to nothing at auction, and they'll certainly hold even the 100-pound tanks. That way you can get the thing up off the ground. You can use a propane tank heater, but again, it has to be designed for propane tanks. And you can use that especially if you work in really, really cold climates like the northern states, Canada, Alaska would. These heaters are designed specifically to warm the tank without creating a fire. All you got to do is make sure you follow the safety instructions and also check with your local fire inspectors to make sure that it's compliant with local regulations. Here's something you may want to invest in if you haven't already done it, and that's get the 100-pound tanks. 100-pound tanks work better in cold weather than 20-pound tanks because they have more volume. Now, it does mean that you got to keep the things filled up, just like I talked about earlier, but because there's more liquid propane in the tank, it's harder for the tank of that size to be impacted by the cooler weather. Now, it still will get impacted because still science is science, and because the weather's gotten cooler, there's less vigorous boiling, but the 100-pound tank is less susceptible to those changes in temperature as the smaller tanks are. You want to monitor and manage your demand. We already said that the cold weather is going to slow that vaporization, that boiling. But if you're super busy, that just makes it worse because you're pulling out more gas than is being produced by that boiling process. So you may want to reduce the menu. You may want to think farther ahead in your prep work so that you're not running all 4 of the burners, 2 fryers, and a griddle and wondering why none of it's staying lit, or wondering why the first thing in line is doing well and the rest of the equipment is not. So you want to plan your workflow so that you're not overloading the propane system, or you might want to thin that menu down so you don't have so many hot things required. You can always stagger the use of your equipment so that you're not running every single propane-powered piece of equipment simultaneously. So let's talk about what not to do. I want to keep you guys safe because that's super important as well, because I want you to be open for many, many years. Do not use flames or unsafe heat sources to warm your tank. I have seen people that will take those little food torches to melt cheese or whatever. They'll take it outside and start to run it up and down the propane tank because they see the frost on it and they think the thing's frozen. It's not. We already said it's not frozen. What's freezing on the outside is the moisture in the air that's being pulled out because of the temperature change between the liquid propane and the exterior air. So it's pulling out that moisture. The moisture lands on the tank and of course it's going to frost, but it's not frozen. You want to make sure your tank is full, but do not overfill it. The tank itself has to have space in there for the liquid to have room to boil, and then that boiling process has to have room for the gas. If you fill the thing completely full with liquid propane, there is no room for it to create gas. So you'll have a full tank of liquid propane that can't power anything. Make sure you fill it to its normal fill level. Don't ignore leaks and don't ignore other maintenance issues. Cold weather is tough on everything in your food truck. You already know that. Inspect the hoses, the regulators, and the connections regularly. We already have difficulty because of everything moving and the vibration of that movement. Makes pinholes easy. Well, if there's a pinhole, guess what? There's a place for that pressure to be let off, so your tank, even if it's producing enough gas from the boiling of the liquid propane, if there's even the tiniest of leak outside, your equipment's going to sputter, and your thought's going to be, well, cold outside, must be freezing because I read everywhere propane freezes. What do you do about frozen propane? So then you walk outside with a lighter and think, well, I'll just light it and warm it up. And then you have a flame on the outside of your food truck. Propane is no joke. You got to be serious about it and understand it. And that's why we're talking about the science. Cold weather does not have to slow you down, but you got to be prepared. A little preparation goes a long way. So those little preparation steps are: check your tanks, make sure there's no leak. Keep your tanks full as they are legally allowed to be. Invest in that 100-pound tank if you only are using 20s or 30s. Get insulation that's designed for propane tanks and then use it the way it's supposed to be used. You want to plan ahead for the winter because you know it's going to get cold. I promise you, your propane is not going to freeze because you're not going to be out at negative 306 degrees. Now, there is one little caveat with that. If you have allowed condensation to get into your pipes, the propane lines, that can freeze because condensation is not propane, it's water. So some people have the regulators freeze because the regulator, what it does is it is wide open on one end and then it narrows down the flow for the gas, so it puts some pressure behind the gas. That's what a regulator does. It regulates pressure. And if those collect condensation, that can freeze. The condensation freezes, not the propane. So the next time that you see somebody that's saying, hey, my propane froze, tell them it's not negative 306 degrees outside. I want you guys to be educated. I want you to be smart vendors. I want you to understand your own equipment. But don't think your propane's frozen. If you have low pressure because of cold weather, because that's what it is, you have low pressure because of cold weather, take those steps that we talked about to make sure you have good flow, and then let the ones that are calling their propane frozen just be closed for the day. Thank you guys so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. If you're finding what we do helpful, please consider subscribing. And if you love what we do, show some support. There's a link in the description to make that happen. Until next time, you guys have a profitable week.